Writing Out Loud, a program designed to explore in-depth interviews with writers to hear that words have voices.
Hello everyone, I'm Teresa Miller and welcome to Writing Out Loud. My very special guest today is my good friend Louisa McCune Elmore, who is editor of Oklahoma Today, and you've got a new column too.
I
Louisa.
do.
You've got all sorts of things going on, not to mention the three boys.
It's busy. Mm-hmm.
It is busy. I've got to tell you, we both love magazines. We love the feel of magazines. We love the sound of pages turning. But I'm getting awfully attached to my Kindle.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I am. What is the future of print media?
Oh, gosh. Well, I've just been having this conversation at the office. I think that magazines are incredibly viable, but they are also a luxury item. And I think that newspapers are certainly in more dire straits than magazines. Newspapers will become news sources, and in Oklahoma, the Oklahoman has done an extraordinary job of making News OK a really fantastic site. But I'm less worried about magazines than I am anything else. But I think that we've got some answers to find, and we're certainly thinking about it at Oklahoma Today, and we've got to have a more significant web presence. How does that impact our print version? I mean, these are conversations that we're having weekly and watching what everyone else is doing. The Economist has been a leader, upping its subscription price, and everyone's watching and being inspired by their increase in circulation. But it's I don't think it's as easy to say that print will never die as it was maybe even 2 or 3 years ago.
You have a very strong presence on Facebook for the magazine, personally. What role do you think social media are going to play in the evolution of publishing?
Well, I don't know how it would impact publishing per se. I certainly think the promotional value of it is important. It's free promotional value. I do think that we all have to be careful about how we present ourselves on social media. I tend to not promote the magazine per se on like my personal Facebook page, but Twitter I have used occasionally exclusively for magazine related stuff. Or at least my identity on Twitter is magazine related, and not here are my three boys, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think I think social media is probably still just that. I don't think you're going to be reading. I think it's a great tool for promotion. That's where I'm not sure where it will go beyond that.
It's going to be fun to see, though.
Yes, it is, and it's entertaining, and it's a great
incredibly
time suck.
entertaining. I'm hearing, time suck is it, because I'm hearing from people I haven't heard from in
it's
20
so
years.
It's magic.
It is a magic. Oklahoma Today is a survivor, though. You've been in business for over 50 years, not you personally. I mean, the magazine's a lot
Almost.
older. No, not quite. What are the strengths of the magazine, Louisa?
Well, our longevity, certainly that we have a collected archive online, free and available to everyone, going back to 1956. And that official record of who we are as a people and as a place is an incredible gift to the state of Oklahoma, and our very apolitical position. I mean, we know which side the bread is buttered on. We're not going to do any sort of incendiary stories, but we, knowing that, I think, tell the collective story of who we are as Oklahomans, and that's going to be incredibly valuable for the present and the future.
It's a beautiful magazine.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
It's so pretty. The photography, I think, particularly, is just spellbinding. And I can't imagine a Kindle or another digital device capturing that like a true print magazine can do.
That's true. I mean, I still think that we can't. At least it's my job to not rest on the laurels of the intimacy of print. Okay, so I believe that in the tattered cover and the feel and the smell of the magazine pages up next to you. In fact, I was at Research. I was in Tulsa this past weekend. I always liked discovering new grocery stores, had never shopped at Research, and so went there and was standing in line at the checkout, and there was this huge newsstand, and I was so excited. My first reaction was, I love magazines. Oh, look at all those magazines. And then my second reaction was, wait, I work for a magazine. Let me see if ours is there. So I went and found it, and sort of snuck a few copies into a better position on the newsstand.
Yeah,
good. And the idea of going and spending $50 on the newsstand on 10 or 12 different magazines is just, still as thrilling for me as it was when I had $50 to just blow on the newsstand, with 3 little boys that I have to tend to all the time. But so print, there is a love affair that people have with magazines, and I certainly still have it and will always have it. But I do think that as editors and publishers, we have got to make some bold decisions about how to retain subscribers and get new ones.
How do you think Oklahoma Today has changed under your leadership?
I think it has probably it's been less aw shucks. It's been less, can you believe that this incredibly wonderful thing exists in a place like Oklahoma? I mean, it's sort of a post, I'm not sure what the word is, but we are editing the magazine from the assumption that Oklahoma is the best place in the country to live. So that would be one of the more defining tones or the tenor in the pages. Now, in terms of processes, I'd say factual accuracy is one of the things that we prize. And as a writer for us, how we go through that fact-checking process.
Grateful for it.
Yeah, but we still have a margin of error. So can you imagine a small, maybe 1 or 2 errors per issue, but if we didn't fact-check the magazine, you'd have, a massive amount of correcting to do in the post-mortem. But so accuracy is something that we have prized since I've been there. It's been 12 and a half years.
It's hard to believe.
Yeah, I came and I was 27, I'm 39, almost 40. So
one of the highlights of each issue for me is reading your letter to readers. You pull us in with your wit and your insight. How important do you think that personal touch is to maintaining and building an audience?
Well, I think that most magazines most readers of magazines like to have a person that they can identify with. And early on, I did not have my photo in there, but several editors of sister regional magazines around the country were sort of insistent that I would do that as a point of connection for audiences. And so I have my email address in there and have for years. But I think it enhances the intimacy of the experience of reading a magazine.
I think so too, and now you're using those same skills as a columnist for the Journal Record. How did that come about? You're a magazine editor. You've got 3 kids. We're showing their baptismal pictures. They're so cute. Louisa is so cute.
I feel very lucky.
Why take on this extra job at this particular time in your life?
That is a darn fine question.
I thought it was a darn fine question. I didn't even have to work on that one.
Yeah, because I generally write it sometime between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. And it's due on Wednesday and publishes on Friday on their page 6 and also on their website. I knew Ted Struley, he's the editor. He had moved here a few years ago and had been in touch with me before he got to Oklahoma asking about freelance work. He ended up becoming the editor of the Journal Record. We'd had lunch a time or 2 at the Skirvin Hotel. And I was walking Mac home from school in the this past fall, and ran into Ted, who was at the stop sign. And we got to discussing this, that, and the other. And it somewhat came up in that conversation. I was just literally, I looked a wreck. And
it always happens.
And then 2 months later, we shared a contributor, one of our best freelance writers, Tom Lindley, had gone to work for Ted as an employee in the newsroom. And so I wanted to go over there and make sure that it was okay that Tom still did the occasional piece for us. And in that conversation, he asked me if I'd be willing to write a weekly column, and I was excited by it. It is definitely, it takes me about an hour and a half to write my magazine column, and it takes me probably 2.5 to 3 hours to write this Journal Record column, just because I'm pulling from a lot of different ideas and things going on, and they don't fact check. They do to the degree that a newspaper can, but they're publishing 5 days a week, so. They have a very, very light hand as an editor. I don't have the safety net of Steffi, who's my copy editor at Oklahoma Today. So I have to put a little bit more into it, and plus it's just more of a word count. My editor's letter is about 500 words. This is about 650, and then I end up submitting 800 words generally.
Just as an interesting point of contrast here, we're showing your desk at home as compared to your desk at work. This is pretty telling, Louisa.
It is.
It's very telling.
It is. Now, it's busy. It's a very busy life for which I am eternally grateful. And my Oklahoma Today identity is certainly different than my home identity. That's for darn sure. But also, my writing identity at home. I mean, I share my computer with Mac, who's looking at Lego Star Wars videos on YouTube. And I mean, it's a busy hub of that house. That computer desk, that table, really.
In previous interviews, we've talked about editors you've admired. Who are some of the columnists that have inspired you?
Well, the idea of being a columnist has been something in my mind's eye for 20 plus years. In fact, I think we emailed about, a few months ago, I was writing my new column. I was, editing the magazine and having these 3 small children who who are the light of my life. And I was like, oh my God, this is the vision that I had 20 years ago. It's manifesting. Like by 40, I want this, I want that, I want this. And so I forgot to mention a few other things in that vision, which I'm working on for the next 20 years, I'd like to add. But a few of the columnists, certainly the greats like Anna Quinlan. Obviously, there are many.
Love Anna's work.
Yeah, many other contemporary columnists. Herb Cain, out of San Francisco. He's passed away, of course. But my grandmother, she was a columnist for 36 years for the Oklahoman, the Daily Oklahoman. She wrote about dogs. It was called Hound Hill, and so having that sort of in my background, it's my mother's mother. Her name was Louisa, and she combined her love of dogs with a gift for writing, and so that being in my background sort of imbued kind of a natural maybe destiny that I had there.
One of your most powerful columns deals with a friend. You call her Tracy. That's not her real name. And she's been in prison for a drug charge. How did your friendship become a platform for you to talk about a really serious social issue that we needed to discuss?
Well, I had, there's something about the prison experience that terrifies me for good reason. It should. That has been just upset me over the years. The increase in private prisons. This is not something I talk about generally in the public forum, but just private prisons seeming antithetical to how we should treat our criminals. But that should never be. There should never be a for-profit element to that. But remind me where we were again?
Well, we're talking about this chance for a platform. One of the things that's so interesting to me, and you said it earlier, that Oklahoma Today is apolitical. But in your column, you have a chance to take stands.
I do have a little more freedom. That's right. So I have wanted to cover this idea about women in prison because Oklahoma is the worst in the world.
See, that's startling to me. That was startling to me.
It's incredible. It's an incredible statistic, and I knew about this 6, 7, 8 years ago. And had wanted to write about it. When I started writing this column, I knew that I was going to need to address or wanted to address that on some level. Well, all of a sudden, my friend, pops out of the car and comes up to the house to see the boys. And so we sat in the kitchen and talked for half an hour. And I thought, here's my opportunity to write about this. And it gave me also an opportunity to see what had been going on in the last year or 2 or 3. Well, Art LaFrancois is a professor at Oklahoma City University. I knew Art was involved with this, and I think even Henry Bellman, to a lesser degree, was involved with this reform in the later stages of his life. And so I thought, well, Tracy's a personal way of making the reader have a sense of buy-in from the get-go, and then that will be a nice way for me to launch into the situation and what the situation is of late. And there is good news. I mean, Oklahomans, Oklahoman leaders on both sides of the aisle are endeavoring to fix this problem and not, as Art says, dispense judgment and sentencing by the seat of their pants. So I think we're poised for reform on that.
And don't you enjoy being part of the conversation?
I do.
It's empowering in a way, isn't it?
It's incredible. It's brought a lot to my life. There have been a couple things. My systems of thought over the last couple of years have been evolving and changing, and this column has been a real gift to me, and I hope they like me, because I really like the opportunity. It's forced me to be disciplined. It has got me writing again. I mean, the only thing, I'm not doing much. I do much more editing, obviously, for Oklahoma Today. And it's made me notice the world around me, and it's made me just have an awareness of the vibrations and the nuances of life, a little more so than I would normally do.
You mentioned to me off camera that one of the appeals of doing this column was that the journal record said no holds barred. You can write anything you want to, and that's a great freedom. But are there restrictions you have to place on yourself? Are there certain subjects that are just going to be off limits for you?
Well, namely, anything that has the appearance of a conflict of interest of any sort.
Sure.
So, you know, I can't use the magazine. Now, I've made reference to Oklahoma Today when it's appropriate, but I can't use the column as a stumping ground for Oklahoma Today, for maybe a board that I'm involved with, or, you know, I can't use it like any good journalist doesn't use it to further their own personal agenda. That's as I understand it, my limitation, and that's. But he hasn't. I mean, you know, obviously keep it fairly PG rated, and I'm probably okay. I mean, Ted may see this and say, no, you can't do this, this, and this. But they've given me freedom.
But personally, in your own life, as you sit down to write, you think, boy, that would be good. I just can't.
Well, my
can't
children.
go there.
You know,
yeah,
my
that's
children.
What I was going to get to.
My children. Again, I can make. You know, I'm an extraordinarily superstitious person. To a fault. I mean, you know, it's like I have to run around the car 6 times in order to go through a stoplight. I mean, I don't, but I mean,
Yeah, you do.
It has paralyzed me in some instances. And so, you know, if I were I feel like I want to write about them, or as individuals, or as a collective lot of 3 boys under the age of 5, but I'm going to have to do some sort of like sage burning, or I mean, I will have to get right within the cosmos in order to write about it. Now, my husband too. I've made, you know, he's an entertaining guy, but there are some things that you just don't, you know, want to go down the road of and be too revealing.
Well, you write a lot about Chad. He's a meat lover. We know
Yeah,
that.
right.
I love that column about him. Has it changed the dynamic at all between the two of you? He knows that anything he says might wind up in a column.
Well, it's interesting. You know, he's my mother has read almost probably everything I've ever written that's been published. Now, I can't say the same for Chad. Okay.
Yeah. Great guy. We love him.
And that's okay. You know, that's fine. That's fine. But he is the only person now with this little journal record column that I seek his opinion on before I submit it to Ted and the copy desk over at the Journal Record. So it has actually created something between the two of us that was unexpected. Just in the last several months. So I wake him up at 6 a.m. and, you know, can you read this real quick, you know, and he has a point of view. And I have certainly edited things based on his input. And
You're
You're
obviously a very free-spirited woman. That comes across in your column. But I want to ask you about a phrase you used in describing some women artists, and you said that they were feminine without being irritating. And I thought you might elaborate on that. I thought that was a great line.
Well, you know, there's a strident type of woman or man or liberal or conservative who's just off-putting, just frankly off-putting. And you know, it's Gloria Steinem. You know, it's Gloria Steinem who is so lovely and so elegant, and she had great style and great flair, and yet she was such a voice for women everywhere. And so, you know, her you know, people would put her in the strident category, but she matched it with wit and elegance and a sense of humor. I mean, I like that. You know, I find anyone who's too much of anything in the strident category as just off-putting. So that's, I think, what I mean.
Oh, I love the line. Your other line, you know, women are the new men.
Right, I do love that line. That's one of my favorite lines that I've had over the last couple of years.
That's a great one. In that same column, you referenced Kathryn Bigelow. Why was her Oscar win for Best Director, so significant in terms of women's rights, in terms of human rights, really?
Well, it certainly hadn't happened before. She won for The Hurt Locker, which I thought was a great movie. In fact, that character really reminded me of Chad Elmore, who I married. Sort of a man's man,
a meat lover,
loyal to the end, a meat lover, yes. And but I think that, you know, speaking of an attractive woman, I mean, a very good-looking, never used her good looks to inform the importance of her win as Best Director. I think it was like Barack Obama becoming president. You know, The Bridge, this David Remnick new book. He's the editor of The New Yorker. He's just written this book on Barack Obama, and the title of it's The Bridge. You know, how he has become that bridge, a reference to Selma. But in the same way, Kathryn Bigelow is that bridge toward viewing art and viewing not as women's art, but as general art. You know, that it's not just. I think it was great that she got the award, but no one who was watching The Hurt Locker was watching it thinking that a woman directed it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
She wasn't intrusive in that way.
No, not at all. Not at all. She was just as capable of telling that story as a male director was, and if not better, for her own talent. Her own talent speaks for itself.
And one of the overall qualities of your columns, the ones that I've gotten a chance to read, is they're big-spirited, but they're always a little edgy. And I was really surprised in the one column when you were giving advice to Oklahoma aspiring writers, and you said, okay, let me just say it straight out. This comes from you. You love Oklahoma. You need to leave.
Oh, yes. That's right. Yeah, I believe that. And, I don't mean to make my advice so self-referential. I think I left. And maybe that was informing my advice, but go and do. Go, leave this place, go around the world, go to New York, go to Leavenworth, Kansas, go to Austin, Texas, go somewhere, go to Nova Scotia, go to Antarctica, go somewhere and have an experience if you want to be a writer. Don't be content to just stay here, whether here is Oklahoma or here is Manhattan. I think that's the point that I was making. But do come back. We'd love to have your talent.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask you, because you were in New York for a number of years. You were part of the editing scene there. I like to tell everybody you worked very closely with JFK Jr. But
somewhat. I mean, I was near
at George.
him.
You were near him at George, and that's big. That's big, Louisa.
Yeah.
So we need to get that up all the time. But you came back. Do you think that helped you understand Oklahoma more and appreciate it more? The fact that you had seen other things, that there was a point of contrast for you.
Absolutely. And frankly, it just. It broadened my worldview, and I met so many worthy and interesting people who exposed me to so many great things, and I mean, things that I never would have. I'm just thinking about one of my most embarrassing moments right here on TV.
Let's tell it. No one will tell him.
Okay, the first time I ever went to New York, I was 19 years old, so it was exactly 20 years ago right now. Mm-hmm. And I was there visiting a guy that I was pretty crazy about. Paul Devlin, who's a filmmaker, has been to Oklahoma several times. We've screened his movies at the Oklahoma City Museum of Art. And he took me to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Now, I grew up in Enid, and I had a sophisticated, fairly, family, but I mean, we didn't go to museums, okay? We didn't go to museums. So, oh my God, I can't believe I'm telling this story, but I was so fascinated by this painting, a little bit like those Wilson Hurleys right there, and I went up to it, and I touched the painting. I touched the painting, Teresa, and
I love it.
With this guy in the near background who I was in love with. Mm-hmm. And these security guards descended on me, and I was, as you might imagine, mortified. So, the first rule whenever I go to a museum with Mac is, what's the number one rule? And he's like, don't touch the art. I mean, it is so I might not have had that experience had I not left Oklahoma.
Well, you should have done some quick fiction writing and said, well, it's okay, the curator's a great friend of mine.
I have some
special,
on my feet.
special privileges there. I think that this worldview comes in incredibly well in the column that you wrote about Wilma Mankiller, who passed away recently, because you're able to put her in a larger perspective than just Oklahoma. That is a very beautiful piece. There were so many things you could have said about Wilma. Here's this woman who's accomplished one groundbreaking thing after another, but yet you tended to focus on her friendship with Gloria Steinem, whom you mentioned earlier. Why that particular focus, Louisa?
Well, because first of all, I know the competition. Oklahoma is a small state, and I knew the world and the Oklahoman, and your show was broadcast on Facebook, and I just knew that everybody would be talking about Wilma in a certain light, and her books, her achievements, the Bell water line. I just knew that there were things. I knew Wilma. I'd been to her house. I've known her for about 12 years. I'd certainly grown up admiring her. So my family being from Tahlequah, Muskogee. So I didn't think that there would be as much written about the intimate friendship that she had with Gloria Steinem, who has always been a fascinating woman to me. So that was why I chose that. But frankly, it was Tuesday night, and I was sitting down thinking, how am I going to approach this? I need to write about Wilma. And I was straightening my bookshelf and came across her book, Every Day is a Good Day. And as in the column, I talk about that detail. It takes 4 generations to heal one act of violence. And I couldn't remember where I or I had read that, and then all of a sudden here I was reading that it was Gloria Steinem who'd written that. So it just all of a sudden, it was like, that's what I'm going to write about.
And you made one great pronouncement in this piece, and I agree with you totally, but I thought you might speak to it a little bit, that you thought Wilma was the most important woman in Oklahoma history.
I do, absolutely. And you and I have talked about this. There were, I have identified, and I like to call them the 5 W's in Oklahoma history. Woody Guthrie, Wiley Post, Will Rogers, Wayne Coyne, Flaming Lips, and Wilma Mankiller. She being the only one of those 5 W's, and I think the first name starting with W is a real coincidence, because I do think that legitimately there is a strong case to be made that those are the 5 most important people covering the ground of all their categories in Oklahoma history. Now Wayne, of course, is the only living one of those 5. She, the only woman of those 5. I know. I mean, certainly Kate Bernard. I mean, there are many. There are many women that we can point to, and including you, who were extraordinary. But Wilma had international presence, gravitas. I mean, you know, the Presidential Medal of Freedom winner.
And the humility.
And the humility, and the insight, and the wisdom, and the, you know, she was the best of the best. Yeah.
We've got 30 seconds here. Okay. Is this column going to go into a book, and is this going to be a bestseller? Ree Drummond, I mean, her blog went by. Yes. Do we see a book in your future?
I would love that. I mean, I would like the next 20 years to be about making a little bit of money, and maybe a book or 2 or 3 in there.
I can't wait. You've got it, and you're going to do it. Thank you so much for being here, Louisa. I love you too. Give the kids a hug. And thank all of you for joining us on Writing Out Loud.